The story doesn't begin in Washington, or on Wall Street, or in any room filled with flags and microphones. It begins in silence at a container terminal outside Shanghai, where something that should have happened simply did not happen, and nobody noticed because the cameras were pointed elsewhere. No flashing headlines appeared. No emergency broadcasts cut through sitcom reruns. A routine trade settlement moved across oceans without touching the United States dollar, and for 75 years that was considered impossible. Every barrel of oil, every container ship, every bitter sovereign trade dispute had been forced through the same toll booth built after the Second World War. A monetary checkpoint that made America the financial gravity of the planet. Nations could fight wars, default on debts, even collapse politically, but they could not escape the dollar system without inviting economic suffocation. Then one night the gravity stopped pulling. A shipment of industrial metals traveled quietly between Asia and the Middle East. No dollars changed hands. No New York clearing bank stamped approval. No swift message passed through European servers. The transaction cleared through China's parallel settlement rails, a financial bloodstream running underneath the old system, invisible to Western newsrooms and politely ignored by official statistics. And nobody told you. You were still watching market tickers flashing green, still being assured that the economy was resilient, that inflation was cooling, that stability had returned. You were trained to believe that real power collapses loudly, that if the dollar were ever threatened, there would be speeches, hearings, emergency summits broadcast in prime time. But real power doesn't collapse, it migrates. It disappears quietly while people argue about interest rates and election polls. Somewhere between a central bank press conference and another record-high stock, China finished assembling control over more than $8 trillion worth of settlement influence. Not sitting in a vault, not printed on any balance sheet, embedded into trade arteries, the world now depends on to function. That number does not appear in any Western report because totals expose trajectories and trajectories expose endings. If the public ever added up the swap lines, the commodity corridors, the bilateral clearing agreements, the shadow credit pipelines, they would see a shape forming that no longer resembles a dollar-centered world. You were never meant to see that shape. You were meant to see comfort, progress, recovery. You were meant to trust the system while it was quietly being replaced. And when the replacement is complete, it will not arrive as a crisis headline. It will arrive as a normal day that suddenly feels wrong. A bank statement that buys less, a retirement plan that no longer stretches, a future that seems to shrink without explanation, leading you toward the uncomfortable realization that the next chapter was written somewhere else, in silence, while you were busy being reassured. This is the moment before the story becomes personal, before you feel the shift inside your own household finances tomorrow for the first. You are told the dollar is strong, markets at all-time highs, unemployment stable, inflation cooling, everything framed as proof that the system is healing. But here is the betrayal hiding inside those comforting phrases. Those numbers are not measurements anymore, they are outputs. Manufactured results designed to keep you calm, while the structure underneath quietly erodes. Stock prices are lifted by buybacks funded with debt that never gets repaid. Balance sheets are padded with derivatives that hide leverage so deep even regulators cannot trace it in real time. And when the cracks become too visible, central bank swap lines flood the plumbing with emergency liquidity, socializing losses before you even realize something went wrong. The dollar no longer floats on productivity, innovation, or honest growth. It floats on perception, on the shared agreement that everyone else still believes. And perception today is defended with unlimited money, created at the speed of a keyboard, injected wherever panic threatens to surface. Every crisis since 2008 has followed the same quiet ritual. First, the system cracks in places you are told not to look. Then the public panics as prices wobble and headlines flicker red. Then central bankers appear with serious faces, promising stability, discipline, responsibility. Trillions are created in the background, quietly expanding balance sheets, while television anchors argue about technical details. And while you are being reassured, insiders exit without ceremony. This is not stabilization, it is evacuation. Central banks did not become firefighters rushing toward the flames. They became exit doors built into the walls, private corridors through which the largest players escape first. Press conferences are held, so pension funds remain calm, so retirement accounts do not bolt for the exits. while sovereign wealth funds rotate into hard settlement layers far beyond the dollar perimeter. The illusion is that the system is protected, that your savings are backed by institutions with both the will and the ability to defend them. The reality is darker and far more personal. The system is being abandoned in stages, like a sinking ship where the crew leaves before the passengers feel the tilt. You feel this abandonment in small ways at first: the grocery bill that never quite matches the official inflation number, the mortgage rate that jumps even when growth is supposedly slowing, the savings account that earns nothing while everything around you becomes more expensive. These are not accidents. They are symptoms of a currency kept alive by belief alone. And belief, once it fractures, does not heal with speeches or statistics. It collapses inward, forcing ordinary families to absorb losses that were engineered far above their heads. This is the moment when trust stops feeling abstract and starts feeling like a mistake you personally made. And as that realization settles in, the story moves away from charts and policies and begins pointing directly at the patterns that have ended every monetary empire before this one. What comes next is not theory, it is history repeating itself again. Every empire tells the same story in the beginning, a story whispered to its people and shouted to the world. We are different. Our system is permanent. Our currency is untouchable. Those sentences are not confidence, they are spells, meant to keep doubt from forming until it is far too late. Rome said it while silver was quietly clipped from its coins. Spain said it while galleons of New World gold vanished into foreign creditors' hands. Britain said it while its colonial trade routes were still painted red on classroom maps. And every time, the same pattern unfolded with mechanical precision. First comes reserve currency dominance, the moment when the world must hold your money to function. Then comes debt addiction, when printing becomes easier than producing and promises replace discipline. Then comes the offshore gold drain, as elites convert paper claims into assets beyond the reach of domestic laws. After that, trade corridors begin to reroute, not loudly, but in private contracts written in new units of account. Finally, domestic inflation is blamed on everything except the currency itself, on supply chains, on labor, on wars, on weather, on anything that distracts from the real cause. You never wake up one day and lose reserve status. There is no ceremony, no resignation letter. You lose it, settlement by settlement, contract by contract, until one morning you realize the world no longer needs permission to trade. China did not challenge the dollar with speeches or press releases. It built SIPs, its own clearing system, designed to move money beyond Western oversight. It signed commodity for settlement deals that allow oil, metals, and food to clear without touching New York. It created bilateral swap lines with more than 40 nations, giving them a quiet escape route from dollar dependency. It offered infrastructure in exchange for local currency trade, roads and ports paid for in units that never have to pass through American banks. This is not war, this is architecture. While headlines focused on tariffs and trade spats, the deeper shift unfolded below the radar. Contracts were rewritten, payment rails were installed, financial habits were retrained. The world did not revolt against the dollar, it simply learned how to function without it. And this is the betrayal hidden inside the history books. Empires do not fall when they are weak. They fall when they believe they are invincible, when their citizens are still arguing about quarterly growth while the foundations are being replaced. You were taught that money is neutral, that it flows to wherever it is treated best. You are not taught that power flows away from whoever abuses trust, and trust is the only thing a reserve currency ever truly has. Once that trust begins to fracture, everything you rely on becomes conditional. Your savings become a liability to be managed. Your income becomes a number that buys less each month. And when conditional systems fail, ordinary families are always last to be warned that the rules have changed. When dollars stop being needed abroad, they do not vanish into thin air or drift harmlessly into spreadsheets. They come home, and when they do not arrive as prosperity, they arrive as pressure, the kind that pushes quietly at first, then all at once. Pressure on prices that never seem to fall back. Pressure on bonds that were once sold as the safest place on earth. Pressure on every savings account whose purchasing power depends on the illusion that the rest of the world will always absorb American debt without question. The system is designed so that the last people to know are the people who funded it. While institutions negotiate behind closed doors, households are fed stories about resilience and recovery. By the time the consequences are visible, The rules have already changed. Your retirement account is not an asset in the way you were taught to understand that word. It is a promise issued by a structure that assumes tomorrow will look like yesterday, that markets will always rebound, that currencies will always be wanted. That promise is only as strong as the system that backs it, and systems do not fail symmetrically. They shed obligations. Monetary transitions do not erase balances, because that would be politically explosive. They reprice them instead, slowly enough to be blamed on everything else. Pensions do not vanish. They are recalculated with new formulas, new assumptions, new expectations about what a comfortable life should cost. Savings do not disappear. They are redefined, shrinking in real terms while remaining perfectly intact on paper. This is how people are dispossessed, without a single law being passed that says so. You keep the same numbers, but the numbers no longer buy the same future. The house that once felt attainable drifts out of reach. The years you plan to stop working slide further away, and every adjustment is presented as reasonable, necessary, temporary. The past taught you that time in the market solves everything, that patience is rewarded, that discipline is enough. You were shown charts where every crash eventually turned into a buying opportunity. You were never shown what happens when the currency itself is what is being repriced. You feel it already, even if you cannot name it. Groceries cost more, but the quality feels lower. Insurance premiums climb while coverage narrows. Rent rises faster than wages. These are not random hardships. They are the early tremors of a system absorbing its own excess. And the cruelest part is that responsibility will be placed on you. You will be told you did not save enough, did not diversify enough, did not anticipate the change. The architects of the system will present the outcome as natural, inevitable, unfortunate. But you paid into this structure your entire working life, believing it was built to protect you. Now the structure is being rebalanced, and you are the weight being shifted. The story is now about a future being traded away before you can respond. There is a reason you never hear what elites are rotating into, only what they are selling. You are shown headlines about portfolio rebalancing, about responsible profit-taking, about smart moves in a changing market. What you are not shown is the architecture being assembled behind the curtain. They do not announce exits because exits create panic. They build alternatives quietly, methodically, with the patience of people who know the bridge will not hold forever. Energy corridors are redrawn to bypass unstable choke points. Hard asset custody layers are established beyond jurisdictions that can rewrite the rules overnight. Settlement rails are installed that do not require permission from a collapsing architecture. None of this is about outperforming the market. It is about surviving continuity shifts, preserving function when the old language of money stops being understood. And here is the part nobody watches, because it does not fit into a headline. The system does not run on feelings or speeches. It runs on calendars, swap, expiries, trade settlements, liquidity windows that converge with mechanical precision every quarter. These are not dates you circle in a planner. They are stress thresholds, invisible pressure points where leverage either rolls forward or breaks. The reset never comes with a siren. There is no countdown clock, no red banner warning you to prepare. It comes with a memo you never see, signed by people who finished positioning themselves long before the public was invited to worry. By the time commentators start using the word transition, the transition is already over. This is the cruel genius of financial change. It does not steal in one violent motion. It erodes in ways that feel tolerable until they are not. You adapt to smaller homes, later retirements, thinner safety nets, telling yourself, this is just how the world is now, and each adjustment makes the next one easier to accept. Somewhere beyond your newsfeed, corridors are being rerouted, contracts are being rewritten, balance sheets are being converted into forms that will function after the language of the old system stops working. You will not be invited to those rooms. You will be invited to the aftermath, to the explanation phase, to the moment when officials appear with carefully chosen words about resilience and reform. By then, the question will no longer be whether the dollar system can be preserved. It will be how much of your life was priced in a unit that no longer commands the world's attention. That is the cliff edge this story is leading toward. The moment when you realize the ground beneath your savings was never solid, only borrowed time. And when the announcement finally arrives, when the story becomes unavoidable, you will understand why silence always comes first. Because once they tell you, they are already gone.